Currently it's 21,000 in 2016. Next year we're looking at increasing by 5,000, so it'll be 26,000. Age 5 right through to 18. Yes, so when young people transition into high school, we find that we lose quite a lot of kids in failing to transition well. So they go from being a sort of a big fish in a little pond to the opposite. And it's incredibly different for them, and they don't necessarily adapt very well. So we create a sense of community within the school by pairing groups of year 9s with smaller groups of seniors who've been trained to be their peer mentors for the year, and they meet weekly and teach them things like how to handle peer pressure, time setting, goals, and so on. So there's a building a sense of community within the school and leadership in the senior school. The seniors flourish. We train our Project K mentors over a 25-hour period, which is broken up into probably 2 sessions, but it depends on what's going on in the area. They get to choose how it works. It might be evenings, it might be a Friday and 2 Saturdays or so on. So these people are volunteers. They are trained to be, first of all, to be very self-aware. So what motivates them? What are their pressure points? So would they, in other words, self-learning, and would they be suitable to be a mentor for a 14, 15-year-old and to help guide them? So it's not about telling, it's about walking alongside a young person to help them self-realise and to achieve goals. And then it's about the young person choosing the mentor they feel would work well for them, because if they don't buy into it, it won't. They won't pick it up. It'll be resistant mentoring for a whole year. An incorporated society, which usually involves a membership base, I find that didn't suit our intentions, because when you have a membership base, you get a whole lot of voting issues that can drag you off course. We went for a charitable trust structure, so it's an incorporated body under a trust deed with charitable objectives. So the charitable objectives in New Zealand are health, education, religion, and the betterment of New Zealand society. So we have gone down the education objective, and over a 21-year period our trust deed has been amended 3 or 4 times to keep it current. We have a board of trustees who in effect are like directors of a company. They have the same responsibilities as directors of companies. The expectations of trustees are to guide the strategic direction and to monitor the management. So what you want on your board are people who have been in the industry or have the significant skill sets and experience in areas that you think would be valuable to your organisation. So at the outset we knew that if we had iconic New Zealanders on our board, that would help raise our profile immediately. So we had Sir John Graham, Sir Edmund Hillary, Dame Augusta Wallace, Kath Tizard, Fran Wild, and I'm sure I'm forgetting a few, but yes. So that helped us kick off really. So we have a mixed funding stream, which is we consider to be the safest bet. You don't want all your eggs in one basket, so diversified funding streams are really important to us. So we get a bit of government, corporate, philanthropic, and that means if anything changes out there, we just cut our cloth to suit what we still have in the bank as opposed to having to shut down. So you can expect to starve a bit in the initial days, and perseverance is absolutely key. Belief in what you're doing, perseverance, having the right people around you, and credibility. I don't want to dissuade people from setting up not-for-profits, but first of all find out who else is in the market. Same with business, I suppose. Find out it's not competition, but don't duplicate what is already going on. In New Zealand, there's a proliferation of charitable trusts. I think it's like 25,000 in the country. And people love to fund new ideas, but we want to make sure things are sustainable and working and can be proven to work. And that takes an awful lot of energy and courage and money. Well, I think first of all you've got to identify what skills you've got and therefore what the gaps you've got that you need to fill. And so it's not only skills gap, it's experience gap. So ideally you would do a matrix of the skill sets that you have and whether you expect to sit on the board and or whether you want to be an executive director or just a managing director. And I would think, first of all, you're looking at the skills gap that you need to fill. Then you look for gender and ethnicity and age differentials. So you are getting the widest set of opinions and perspectives that you can. What you need around you will change as the organisation evolves. So years 1 to 5 of our organisation, we were about 5 people. We had the iconic board members who had then said, we're really busy people, so we're going to create a management board who can deal with the monitoring, and we'll just come together quarterly to have some strategic oversight.
I think we all look at it through our own sort of business lens, and we're always biased to what we've done and what's made us successful. So I'll dial back a little bit. So I've had 25 years in the world of finance, and most of which was in New York. And if I look back in my 15 years in New York, I think the bit that defined success for me, and the bit that was the biggest thing that I learned, was basically the power of relationships, and how far those relationships can take you, and how more successful you become, the more important actually relationships actually become. So I sort of pretty well look at everything through a lens of relationships, which is why I sort of came back and did the Kia role, because it's really about connecting people offshore for the benefit of New Zealand businesses that are going offshore to connect. So, there's an established relationship. So I actually believe in life there should never be a cold call. I think the word cold call should just be taken out of the dictionary. And if you have proper relationships with, be that investors, be that clients, be that your staff, then you never have a cold call, because you've built up the relationship in the first place. And then so that's sort of my little ramble on relationships. And why I think it's important in this entrepreneur category is 2 things really. I've been sitting on that investment committee for the Entrepreneur Challenge that Auckland University runs for a few years. And basically you look at the business idea, but you're really trying to figure out the person and whether they have the ability to execute what they say they're going to do, have got relationships with investors and bankers and clients to deliver their plan. So it sort of comes down to the person a lot as much as the idea. And I think that I look at that person analysing whether they're good or bad through sort of this relationship kind of lens. I'll keep drilling on that to answer your question through that relationship lens. So I think the bit that I'd love to see more done on is, often with these entrepreneurs, you start an idea and you create this cool little widget, little tool, you've got the cure for cancer, whatever it might be, and you run off for 2 or 3 years and you work beaverling away making this widget amazing, and then you come to the market to sell it, and you haven't connected with your client, or you haven't connected with, now you start running out of money, so now it's like, geez, I've got to get a banker or dad or someone to fund me. So you actually haven't built relationships with investors or customers or whatever. So answering your idea to one of the first places to start, I actually think it's with building relationships with the end customer, because once you do that, I look back at your periodic thing, I think it was the first tagline was something about find a market gap, and then is there a gap for you? And unless you talk to the customer and figure out is there a real world in there, then you might be the best idea in the world, but if the customer doesn't actually want it, or worse, if you spend 3 years perfecting your widget and make it beautiful, and you go to the market and the client's, oh, I don't want a black one, I want a white one, then it's sort of wasted time and effort. So I think building a relationship with the customer right at the very end to figure out, and then you can go back and build it for your market, and then when you go to your market, you sell it, they feel kind of inclined to buy it because it was sort of quasi their idea in the first place, and you've kind of got them on the hook.
Yeah, I think somebody...
Sounds a bit backwards, but I think that's in essence is, and we're all too quite scared in building relationships and asking customers because we might be scared they might not like my little idea, so I won't do that, and it all sort of gets a bit off. It's amazing how many old sea dogs like myself that are in the market that have learned all these lessons that you're probably about to learn, and they're quite happy to share them basically for free. And we see that in Kia a lot. There's thousands of world-class New Zealanders offshore that are quite happy to help mentor and talk to New Zealand businesses getting going, because it makes, when you're 50, 60 years old, it makes you feel good and you've learned a few lessons and you don't want to see other people wear the same pain that you think they're about to wear, and if you can share that without, and so, soaking up some free advice is a good thing to do if you can get it. Yeah, so I think the trick of an advisory board is, I think, amazing. I think there's a lot of folks these days that want to sit on advisory boards that can add a tremendous amount of value. I think the real secret to it, though, is figuring out as an entrepreneur, as an owner, what are the things you're really good at and what are the things you suck at, and then hiring people on your advisory board that are very good at those things that you need help on. And there's, like anyone who looks at a big board these days, they want diversity, they want accounting skills, they want legal skills, they want branding skills, they want tech stuff, whatever all these buckets that you sort of need as part of your business. And if you're very techie and very legal, but you know nothing about selling, or make sure you get advisory board people on with the skills in the areas that you need. And you can go on Google and look at the most, the best diverse looking board sort of example, and then find those buckets that you need to fill, really. Because our worst thing in business is to hire a bunch of people that look and feel and think exactly like we think, because that's just a super narrow business because our customer base is so wide. So you got to employ people and have them advisory board members that are quite look and think quite differently than us. As I said at the start of the conversation, most businesses in New Zealand that fail, they fail because of a dispute with a partner or an investor or whatever, and having those relationships tight and secure, that's what gives your business the strength. I think businesses with no relationships, they die on the vine, they run out of runway. We look at these unicorns that are doing incredibly well, the Ubers and the Airbnbs and all that of the world. That's because the relationship between the user and the supplier is like totally together. You jump in a Uber, now you've got a direct relationship to the driver, and you don't have to get cheese through Co-op and all these middlemen that basically take money out. So they've just found a technology way to build a relationship super tight. And I think if you look at things through those lenses, we can all make unicorns.
What I find, and because we work with either emerging businesses or we're working with businesses that are in that 2 to 50, 2 to 75 million turnover range, we see there are stages when a person is really, really good for a business and stages when they either have to step back or in some cases let go. And we often call that the brick wall. That you hit a brick wall and things just not quite working, you've got to research it, you've got to figure out what the next step is. And as you grow, there's a reason that at some point, 5 of us sitting around a kitchen table having a yarn and solving problems, it's a bit harder to do that when there's 25 of us. It's very difficult to do when there's 50 of us or 350 of us. And so as the entrepreneur, it's you have this element of when do I let go of control, and actually what am I best at? And interestingly, one of the things I've found for entrepreneurs as they grow is often they get happier when they let go of a bit and focus on the bit that they've got the passion for, and bring in the people who are good at running a large group of people if that's where you've got to. Often you see it, people get a little disillusioned with their business, they get a bit frustrated with their business, and in your heart of hearts, you know, interestingly, subconsciously, it's also the control freak and most of us entrepreneurs, it makes it hard to let go. So if you're being honest with yourself, you can often sense it. And interestingly, it's often the spouse who points it out too. So they'll go, you know, you're just not happy anymore. You don't seem to be, you know, thriving on this. What is it we can do to change it around? And then surrounding yourself in whatever formal or informal way with people you can call on as mentors or advisors. Often, if they're a bit grey-haired, like a few of us, we've seen it quite a bit, and often you'll get someone say to you, is this really actually what you want to be doing right now, or do you want to just focus on this piece? So this idea of I can do it myself, the flip side of it, I don't ask for help, means that often you get into a position which other people could have helped you with. And from my own personal experience, it probably took me about 5 or 6 years to stumble upon this fact for me. And I have set out ever since to surround myself with people I can call upon. And you can do that formally. You could set up a board in your company. You could do it slightly less formally, which is an advisory board, or you could surround yourself with a group of people that you can call upon, either in a formal or informal mentoring role, or even just gather a group of business people together and get together every month and have a conversation. For me, mindfulness is very much a way to stop the voice in my head and still myself to give myself perspective. A lot of entrepreneurs, in my experience, are quite intuitive and they act on feeling. And that's certainly my case. So if you've always got a voice going around in your head, you're often post-rationalizing. And a lot of the most creative ideas that I've come across in my own businesses and I've seen people do have always come from when someone's gone for a walk, or they're in the shower, or you know, Archimedes screaming Eureka. So to get myself more creative, I've found that using mindfulness stills it. It also allows you to focus, because when you run a business, you have a lot of things to do, especially smaller businesses. 1 minute you're having a conversation with a customer, another minute you're chasing an invoice, and then you're going into the kitchen and you're cleaning the dishes because someone's got to do that as well. And Tuesday's the day to take out the rubbish. There's a lot to do, so you're constantly in this process of thinking about the 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 things you need to do. And that's just the business. You've got your own life and families to think about as well. So I find using mindfulness, even just a 3-minute breathing exercise, can bring me into a space where I'll just focus on this thing and get it done. Sorry guys, but we can't multitask. So using mindfulness allows you to get focused, then I go, okay, I'm going to knock that off. Right, then I'm going to knock that off. And that gets me through things. And I would say for me, it's a technique that has allowed me to become far more productive, because I actually get the things that matter done when they need to be done. I've been both a mentor and a mentee, I guess, if that's what you call the other side. And I've found the best relationships that I've had is firstly, is if you're a mentee, sort of being clear enough about what you want, so that when you get in touch with somebody, you can actually say, hey, look, you know, my name's Ben Maris, this is what I'm doing, we may have been introduced to each other or however it is, and this is a sort of help that I'm looking for. Are you able to help me? So that's the first piece, is getting that clarity and then having the confidence to actually ask for help or ask for the introduction so you can get the help. I find the second thing I found is that it pays in the first meeting to actually set some clear expectations. What are their expectations in terms of their availability to help? When does that work for them? How often should we get together? What's their style? So for some people, when they're mentoring, a good friend of mine, Logan Sears, who runs Green Acres and Hire a Hubby, Logan is a person with a huge amount of experience, and he likes to be very clear about what he thinks you should do. I've got other people that I've worked with in the past who are far more question-based and they want to help you figure it out, and then they'll bring in, well, have you thought about, and this is what I might do. So get clear about, do you want to be exploring this, or do you just actually want an answer? And if you get those things done, the last piece you want to think about is all human relationships take a little bit of time to build. So often the first one or two are a little bit stilted before you develop that relationship that allows you to have a deeper conversation. And I guess the final thing for mentees is be vulnerable. And the vulnerability piece is to say this is the help I need, to say, look, I just actually don't know, or I'm feeling a bit down, or I'm finding this pretty tough. And when you're vulnerable, you'll get the best help out of the mentor. Yeah, it's interesting, when you're setting up a business, often you feel you've got to do everything yourself. This might be when you build out your team, it might be when you set up manufacturing, if that's what you do. One of the trends I've noticed, particularly in the last 5 years, is people getting really clear about what they're going to do and what they're going to get somebody else to do. We're seeing it now in the dairy sector, where Green Valley Milk is packaging for Lewis Road and a whole bunch of other people. We're seeing in the professional services area. So one of the companies that I own, along with a UK company, is called the CFO Centre. And the idea there is, for a mid-sized business, you don't want a full-time CFO, but you do want somebody of that level for a period of time, a month. And so what we're seeing increasingly around the world, I think the CFO Centre's got something like 10,000 clients now, is that a lot of mid-sized businesses are saying, well, I'll take a CFO and I'll take that for 3 or 4 days of the month because that's all I need, and then I'll have a finance person. And I'll take a sales director and I'll have that person for maybe once a week, and they'll run the sales team. But I don't need a sales director of that level for all of the week. And so instead of spending a lot of money on a series of people, they'll spend a little bit of money on the right series of people. So you've got that opportunity to do that in that sector. You've got the opportunity to do it, in computing. We're all familiar with, Google, and we're all familiar with Microsoft 365. But now with Amazon Web Servers, if you're developing an IT company, there's no reason to own your own stack. Barring if there's some legal requirements to house information here. So I'd look at that really carefully, because what it does is it allows you to have a different investment structure. If you don't need to go and build a whole lot of VATs or buy a whole lot of computers or pre-fund 3 or 4 really expensive people, it allows you to cash flow it differently, it allows you to build your business differently. So I'd certainly consider very carefully, when you look at it, what is it that I actually need to spend money on and how else can I do that? There's some fantastic shortcuts, like using the Kia organisation, which is Kiwi Expats Abroad. There's over 1,000 New Zealanders running some of the biggest companies in the world that we can always go and get in touch with through Kia. So if you're going to go global, you have to get very clear very early on about how you're going to fund it and what are you going to focus on. There's a lot of talk in New Zealand that there's not enough capital. My observation is there is actually plenty of capital, and we've got a lot more coming on. But capital is not going to invest in an idea they don't believe in. So you've got to have something that people really want to get behind. And you're going to have to knock on a few doors. So the first no's okay, so's the 20th. You just got to keep going if capital's what you're seeking, and get very clear about it. And please don't tell everyone that you're the next unicorn. If I hear that one more time, I will probably get my skill saw out and cut somebody's unicorn head off. Everyone thinks it is. It's interesting, we're just looking at setting a business up. We had an idea pitch to a group of us as investors, and we went on to one of the websites where you can get freelance IT people. And we had a look, and we found around the world 3 of the same idea, more or less. So the person who pitched to us got quite upset. We were quite excited. We thought, if there's only 3 people with this idea, this is actually not bad. We've got a good chance at it. And they'd already uploaded all their docs, so we could actually have a look at it and stress test our idea. So you've got to realise, if you are going to go global, you're going to have to find the capital at some stage, and you're going to knock into competition. But don't get despondent about that. Just get into it. The role of the mentor, largely, in my view, is to guide on the basis of their experience. So typically, if I'm looking for a mentor for a particular purpose, I'll look for the relevant experience that I can anchor on. The flip on that, of course, is that there's a role, if you're going to be a mentee, the fundamental thing you have to do is take responsibility. You've got to take responsibility to ask. You've got to take responsibility to schedule. Even the little things, taking responsibility to pay for the coffee if there's a coffee. And you've got to take responsibility to undertake the actions that you commit that you will. Because there is nothing worse for a mentor than talking to someone and nothing happens. And the final thing is, you've also got to thank the mentor. So if somebody's generously giving up their time to assist you, the one thing they really actually want to know is, are they actually helping? And the two ways to do that are do what you say you will do and thank them for it. And that will help you build your relationship and get more value out of that mentoring relationship.
There's 5 people in this room. Yeah. 3 of us are Asian, right? So Jin is from Korea. I'm not sure, where are you from? From Korea. 2 Koreans and someone who's half Japanese, right? Yeah, right. Okay, what I find fascinating about this and this is actually, we started the Providence report, doing a report in 2003 in Kiwi Asia. Yeah. And rather than wanting to understand, I think it's hilarious calling everybody who's from Asia Asian, right? Like, oh yes, and so what everybody's in a hurry to do is find out what newspaper Jin reads, or how to get me, or everybody wants to know what media channel. We don't care about them, we just want their money, right? I heard the other day that actually I'm working with a really interesting bunch of women who are around 30 years old, okay, in one of the programs we're doing. And what I was noticing about the way they behave, right, because I'm looking at the way they behave, as well as the group of 40-something women and the 40-something men. And what they were saying, they're really fabulous women, but saying, it's interesting that most companies are led by people or at board level who are in their 50s and 60s, and there's sort of a cut-off point. Maybe it's if you're 52, 53, if you're over that, you really, you got into Facebook last year, whatever it might be, though I must get onto this thing. And what they were saying, which was interesting to me, is, in their generation, which is not my generation, we're used to kind of sharing stuff, right? It's we just share stuff. It's just the kind of the thing, right? And I was saying, but the companies are being led by people who don't understand that concept of sharing information about yourself.
We want to be at the pointy end of franchising and industry in terms of taking our business into the next step, which is being in the greater web, or being accessible via the web, digital, whatever you like. And so when we looked at that, we said, well, culturally, from an organisational point of view, shouldn't we practice what we preach? And that was largely for me the catalyst for having a paperless organisation. Let's demonstrate that product that we're trying to sell to 600 franchisees actually works. And so that was actually the catalyst for that. And so we made a plan to push that through over about an 18-month period, so that everybody, in the office, advocates for a digital evolution were practicing it. And being massively successful, Mike, in ways I didn't know. Like, for example, communication. So people within the organisation have challenges in front of them every day because they don't have a printer, a scanner, or a piece of paper or a pencil to refer to. And so what they've had to do is to talk amongst themselves to find a solution. And that has created a completely different environment in this working space, because we've now got people not trapped in offices but sitting beside each other talking about solving problems. So that promotes wider thinking and smarter thinking. It creates and promotes a higher level of equality amongst the people that work here, and a general feeling of achieving things. And so we've got stars here that have found solutions to not having paper that you would never have pulled out of a lineup and said, you do that. There's no silver bullets, there's no easy ride, all of those cliches, but Other than getting lucky with lotto, there's no wake up tomorrow morning and be a millionaire. Well, I've never heard of it anyway. And so you've got to be prepared to work hard. There's a do: work hard, but work smart. And to work smart, you've got to surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. Yeah, having a desire to want to do really well, but with that comes confidence, and it can be understated. There's lots of different ways that's described. So yeah, I think experience allows you to see that a little bit. We've got people here who operate at the same level from a management perspective, but in completely different styles, but just as effective. And I think age and experience gives you the ability to perhaps look at that a little and see those things.
You think you're going to make that much money in the first year? It's like, well, but that was the reality check of, you sometimes you get a bit carried away with where you think it's going to go and what it's going to do. And he was right in a sense that the first year it didn't do as well as what the business plan said it was going to do. But it was great to have that feedback because I have 3 people that I bounce things off and sit down and my mentors, and they all offer a different opinion around what we discuss, and which then gives me a rounded result on what I think we should do going forward. So they're all quite different.
There's a lot of things we can learn from Israel, and there's also a number of things that are just simply different and we wouldn't be able to replicate. But when you look at Israel, and the way we summarised it was around some C's. There's a recipe they have around their innovation and also their rate of commercialisation. They have a very strong culture that's, they do operate as a tribe. They're very outward facing because they're surrounded on 3 of their borders by pretty hostile neighbours. So they tend to buddy up. They go global. They don't see the Israel market as a market in itself. So they think global first. And culturally, they also accept risk in a way that I don't think we do in New Zealand. So they are quite accepting of risk. And an example was if you're a startup over there and you fail, you're helped back up by the government because your probability of succeeding the second time round has just jumped up because you've learned a lot through that process. So culture was the first one. Collaborative. They're very collaborative everywhere you go. They told the same story. Everyone we met over there, whether it was in government or academia or within the private sector, their ability to network and pass you through to other people was pretty impressive, and it was quite a learning for us. A lot of us actually met each other for the first time on the bus in Israel, in a country which was ironic given how small New Zealand is, and so we've built a network we've kept since. But that was so collaboration's a big one. Cross sector, capital. They have a very high capital investment, not only from within the country and R&D, but also principally from out of the US. But so really high levels of funding of R&D, which is quite critical to support innovation. Capability, and when we say that, we mean not only in systems and processes, but within their people. A very high focus on STEM, so science, technology, engineering, maths, right from school all the way through, then up through the armed forces. And very strong systems, so capabilities high as well, and they've been doing it for 20 years, so it's sort of innovation and entrepreneurialism in the DNA. And then they have very strong communication as well, and so there's a bunch of things going on in Israel we thought were pretty interesting. Some we could emulate, others we couldn't. But what it tells you is, we need to think about our risk profiles. We need to put more capital into the system. We probably need to foster, encourage, set rules around more and more STEM students coming through the system and how we do those. We need to continue to build our entrepreneurial capability. I think as Kiwis we think we're fairly entrepreneurial. I would contest we're not. I would say we're very creative, got lots of ideas, very weak at commercialising them. And we probably need to look out more, which is interesting. We're a country surrounded by sea, so we should be looking out, but we tend to face in. So probably one final point from me is I think for anyone on this course, and if you're a budding entrepreneur, I'd sort of encourage you to go at it hard. Take the risk early. As Hutch and I know, the older you get, your risk profile drops, you have mortgages and kids, so take the risk early, but definitely be very, very clear about the problem you're trying to solve. And as soon as you've locked on that and you think you've got it validated with a market, go hard. Build your product very fast, very cheap, get it out there, test it, iterate. Make sure you've surrounded yourselves with a good cross-functional team. And get your product to market. If you think you can then scale it, go looking for channels and go looking for capital. I think the world's never been in a better place for entrepreneurs, and it's really about being disciplined around your thinking, but also taking risk and being very, very fast.
Yeah, I think leadership is, I would say personally, probably the hardest thing to do as an entrepreneur. I think coming up with ideas, easy. I think we were talking earlier, deciding on which idea to do is like your biggest problem. Actually doing the job, like we all tend to be doers. We like to get stuff done. But actually leading other people, unfortunately, it took me many years to work this out. Not everyone's like me. So and everyone likes different leadership styles. Probably the biggest piece of advice I would say about leadership is work to your own true self of being a leader. So everyone's got their own leadership style. Some people are very autocratic, some people are very nurturing. And I don't think you should beat yourself up if you're autocratic or you're nurturing. You've just got to go with being you and being a really genuine version of you, and people will be attracted to that. And if they don't fit with your style, they can go. I don't think you should necessarily, in fact, I 100% believe that you need to have your own leadership style and own it, rather than try and be like Richard Branson if you're not Richard Branson, or try and be like, Bill Gates if you're not a Bill Gates. Like, you need to be you, and those people will surround you rather than trying to change. I think it's really important. Then as your business grows and you get to that next kind of stage of professionalism, you need to generally bring on skills that you don't have. Like for me it was processes and systems and things like that, because I wasn't that great at them and still aren't, so that's fine. So I have people that can now come in and go, right guys, we're going to make sure we get all the accounts done by the 28th of the month, etc. Whereas I'd just be like, oh, it's the 5th of the next month and I still haven't sent out my invoices. Fine if you're a small business. As you grow, cash flow is quite important. So I think you need to bring on those skills as you grow. And then I'm very aware as well that at one stage, for most business owners, not all of them, you might have to let go and let a more experienced CEO come in and move your focus into something else. But not all the time. I mean, you look at Google and Facebook, like they're still rocking their companies pretty well. So I think the rules are changing, which is quite exciting. Not everyone can come through, like your existing team that you started with aren't necessarily the same people who are going to be happy at that next level of business, and you often lose a lot of key staff members, and that's really common, happens, but it always hurts, So there's that. I think it can be, I think as I discussed before, it can be quite lonely at the top sometimes. So if you've got, at the end of the day, it's almost like your mum and dad at a company, so you can't really can't share everything with everybody all the time, which you tend to like to do, especially if you work on social media. You do have to put that brave face on and bring everyone with you, and that can be quite tough sometimes. But at the same time, on the other flip side, when things are up, they're so up, but it's when things are down, they're like really down. There's like not a lot of in between. I think you have to, as an entrepreneur, you have to enjoy a roller coaster. If you just want to have, who was I talking to the other day, they're like, oh, why don't you just sell everything? Because I'm at the stage, I could sell everything, go live in Waihi for the rest of my life, really happy with my family and 2 children. And I was like, oh, but I'd be so bored in like 5 minutes. So it's not about security, it's about the experience. So if you're an up and down person, you're going to love entrepreneurship. If you're like, oh, I want to do it just so I can have my $10 million and retire, there's better ways to do it. Go become a banker.
I think there's 4 main elements, so which I would describe as lead, shape, build and deliver. So leading being that part about having a clear vision and purpose, and what am I setting out to achieve, and how to engage others in that vision. And then shaping in terms of how am I shaping the business and what direction am I taking it in, how am I making an impact and adding value. Building those effective networks, building a team around you, building your own capability as well as the capability of others. So building that business up, and then delivering, so really getting those results at the end of the day, so turning that vision into a reality and bringing it to life to get those results. You know, an entrepreneur is a leader. It's someone who has an idea for a business, and a successful entrepreneur is someone who can engage others in that idea and that vision and bring it to life. So, you know, those things that I was talking about in terms of the role of leadership and what does a leader do, that is what an entrepreneur needs to do. So it is about engaging others in what you're trying to achieve. That might start at the very beginning by a conversation with a bank manager about trying to get funds and engaging a bank manager or other investors into what you're trying to do. It might be in terms of building a team and trying to engage others in what you're trying to achieve. So how are you going to really drive that, and all of those skills that are required to turn that idea into reality. So the generalist skills that you need when you start out as an entrepreneur, where you're doing all sorts of tasks perhaps yourself in terms of finance, your IT, all of the different kind of generalist things. You might be involved in employing people and needing to find out about different employment laws, and then eventually as you grow, looking to see how you can get those functions fulfilled by other people. Businesses have got to a place now where there's recognition of the business case for diversity. So people are hiring different people from different countries, different backgrounds of work experience, and then however at that first hurdle of when people find it quite difficult to work together, they're not actually getting past that to keep going and gain that value. So that's a real kind of watch out of preparing yourself to adapt and work to that diversity, and realise that takes some time to work through. Gallup has a tester you can go on and do in terms of finding your strengths, so that you can, and if you actually, there's lots of different tools out there that you can, if it's a free type of survey that you can do, and if you Google it, you can find lots of different ones where the results will feed into some research or others. So that's why they do it. I think that the caution around that is really understanding the results and what are you going to do with that, and how telling are they. So that's why I would be looking to who do you know well that you can trust, who would be able to give you some insightful feedback. And I think a good quick framework for that is to just ask people, what can I stop, start and continue doing? So it really gives someone almost the permission to say, these are the things that perhaps you could do with working on or do differently, because again, people might feel that they want to stick to the safe zone of saying what's working well and all the positives. So that's a good, really simple framework to work to. If you look at the behaviours of a leadership team, they can quite often mirror that of the chief exec, because that has really set the culture. So I've seen that happen where you've got a company that's been under pressure, for example. It's become, the chief exec's become quite reactionary, very task focused, and having to achieve certain key targets, and to the point where it's become a bit more command and control style of leadership, just get the task done, not taking other people along with them. And then you see that starting to ripple through the organisation. Just knowing yourself. It's so important to start off with knowing yourself, and what's driving what you're wanting to achieve. What's really at the background of what you want to do, and knowing what you value and what's important to you. So what kind of leader are you going to be? What values are you going to be willing to compromise on? What ones are you not going to be able to compromise on? And knowing that as your, your stance. What are others going to know you by? And knowing not only, what am I willing to do to achieve what I want to achieve. A good question that gets posed is, what am I willing to suffer as well to achieve what I want to achieve?
But fundamentally, business doesn't change. Business is people. So I think social skills, as well as true business skills, are required to run a business, because it does centre around people. There's two great pieces of advice. One is put your big undies on when you have to and act, and the other is never fill the hole with an arsehole. So many times people panic when someone's resigned and they think, oh my God, we need someone in that role, we need someone in that role. Do not employ a person if they're not right. I also believe in some of the key roles within a business, you should definitely do psychometric tests. Psychometric testing is invaluable if you've got a little inkling, because go with your gut, always go with your gut. Your gut, your first impressions are usually always right. And if you've got a little inkling of unsettlement around hiring someone or something, in a key creative role or a strategic role or whatever, that psychometric testing will often flare that right up. So, go with your gut, always hire the right people, do some psychometric testing around that, because it's very expensive. When you employ someone, it's really expensive to get them off the bus. It's really easy to get them on and it all looks fabulous, but everything on paper is not the same as day to day.
Firstly, as I said, understand your own strengths and weaknesses and try to recruit to your weaknesses. I think that's really important. I think don't hire your mates, hire the best people for the job. And part of that comes back to being really clear about what the roles are. We're all guilty of saying, gee, Sally just resigned, we need another Sally, let's go and hire another Sally, without sitting down and saying, what was Sally doing? What did Sally's job used to be? What's Sally's job going to be tomorrow? And maybe hiring a different type of Sally. In a startup mode, of course, you're often hiring for the first time into roles, and so that's a little bit different. But defining the roles and making sure you've got a mix of skills is still really, really important. So you don't want a whole lot of your mates out of your IT class, because sooner or later somebody's got to go out there and be the salesman, or somebody's got to be the brand champion, or somebody's got to be the recruiter or the people manager or whatever else it might be. So you really do need a mix of skills. And I say those skills are across, dealing with change, leadership, financial skills, product development skills, sales and marketing skills, people skills, and customer skills. So what's the role that I'm looking to recruit for? And then secondly, recruit slowly. So take your time. I have a little story, Hutch, that I tell quite often. The best recruit I ever made, I interviewed him 9 times. The worst recruit I ever made, I was busy, I got somebody else to interview them, I popped my head in the room for 5 minutes, and it took me 6 months to untangle myself from that appointment. You might say, how do you interview somebody 9 times? Well, in that case, it was a senior role, it was an important role, and you have the typical meeting in the meeting room, and then you meet for coffee, and then in that particular case, I invited him to a corporate golf day. And then I invited him and his wife to dinner with me and my wife. And so you start to see people in all sorts of different guises, you learn a lot about how people handle themselves on a golf course, or how they communicate with restaurant staff. Some people can be quite dismissive of restaurant staff, others can be quite respectful. So interviewing people, it's not everything's an interview, it's often a conversation or a night out, or you meet for a drink after work or whatever. But I think it's important, if you're recruiting critical people, senior people, spend the time, take the time, get to know them. This generation, the millennial generation, really want meaningful stuff to do. They want to understand what the company objective is and how their little piece of the world fits into that. And then I think the next thing is how you remunerate people. And it's when you remunerate, I think every single role should have some form of incentive. And we're very good at incentivising and celebrating salespeople in business generally, but we're not necessarily good at finding out ways to incentivise other people around the organisation that are in non-sales roles. And it can be as simple as walking around at Christmas time with a few $100 notes in your pocket and giving them out to people and saying, hey, thanks for doing a great job. But to me, everybody from the receptionist to the top sales guy should have an element of incentive aligned to their remuneration. And you'd be surprised how many people are out there who are quite happy to work for nothing to help young people get started, or work for a little piece of the shareholding if it comes off. And there's even in a marketplace the size of New Zealand, which, let's face it, is quite small, there's a whole lot of really good, talented people out there who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, who've been around the traps a lot and had really good quality international experience in all sorts of businesses, and they'd be happy to come and play a role. I do a couple of those at the moment, and I have a ball. And I don't think I'm an exception to the rule. I think there's plenty of people who would do that. And again, look for if you've got a business that's going to have an export orientation, look for people who've had experience in export. If you've got a business that's got a very heavy sales focus, then look for somebody with sales skills. And again, try to look for the skills that you don't have. I read a lot of articles, and what happens when if you read the right stuff, a lot of the time it'll confirm your own understanding, but it might give you another idea about how to contribute it, how to communicate it. Does that make sense? So you read something, it's not necessarily new to you, but it changes the way you might choose to communicate that material. We all read, business biographies of people people have actually been out there and done some of this stuff and written down how they did it. So it actually makes a lot of sense to read that and see if you can learn from it. Look, I just think you be a sponge. I don't think there's any, especially now. You could say to people, go and read articles on LinkedIn, go and read articles on HBR. The reality is there's stuff everywhere. But make your self-education a priority, and keep reading and keep looking and keep watching videos and all of that sort of stuff. And by the way, if they want to read my book, they can do that too. Don't be afraid to ask dumb questions, right? The best leaders and the best managers are people who ask lots and lots and lots of questions. Sending out an email or a company newsletter, that's not communicating, because people at best will skim over them. What you've actually got to do is sit people down in a room and talk to them. And one of the things I used to do when I had a big team, as you might remember, every week I used to have a morning tea with one of the teams. And the only rule was they bought the agenda and I bought the muffins. And you end up sitting talking to your people about what they want to talk about. And as part of that process, you get your messages across, and slowly over time you start to build the culture of the organisation you want. Yeah, well, Tom Peters, I remember not long after he wrote In Search of Excellence in the 80s, he said there's nothing more complex than keeping it simple.